Hello everyone, welcome to your next class. In this one, we're going to be talking about how to create your own custom class types in Python. So we've been dealing with all of these different class types in our lectures, from lists to dictionaries to NumPy arrays and matrices. We're going to show you how to build your own versions of something like, let's say, like a NumPy matrix, or your own basic class type that has its own set of attributes and methods. So basically, once you learn the basics of doing this stuff, you'll be able to start building your own libraries and packages that other people could potentially use. So in this class, you're going to learn how to build your own class objects. You're going to learn some of the basics of building class objects in terms of some of the key features of class objects and how to use them, how to build them. And then at the very end, I'm going to teach you how to save your class object to a file so you can then import it into Python for something else. So basically, creating something you can then use for later coding. So storing some sort of process or method as a class type that you can then import later on or for other projects. So kind of building your own Python libraries in the end. So some definitions, guys. So we're going to learn about what the difference between a class attribute and a class method is. A class attribute is basically a variable that's stored in your object. If you remember, if you've gotten up to the data chapter in this course around chapter 6, we started using something like the iris dataset, which is a dataset of flower petals. And you can, have that object and do .target or, .data, and it has, a bunch of information stored in it. So basically, when an object's attribute is a variable that's stored for that object, and a class method is a function that's stored for that for that object. So that function can either work directly on that object or do something else entirely. However, usually a class method is like you have some object and you have some information on that object and you want to perform some sort of function or process on that object. So you would build methods that you could then use to pick between that for whatever that data is. For, let's say it's a data science example. So some sort of data object, you can then build a method around that. So without any more explanation, guys, let's just go into a syntax example where I draw out how to create a class object so you can understand what I mean in more basic terms, or more down to the metal. Okay, everyone, here we are in our syntax section. So first thing you'll notice in our first line here, in order to define a class, we really just use the term class. So we say rewrite class, and then the next thing that we use for syntax is we name our variable, or name our class name. So in this case, we're naming our class first class, using that mixed naming method or naming type where your first word is lowercase and all subsequent words are uppercase with no underscores. You don't need the parentheses here. I've included it because it's just kind of a force of habit. Most people don't include them though, so for the most part, I would say just keep the parentheses out. However, this won't break anything at all. The next thing you're going to notice is that we have our colon syntax, and so therefore everything that is associated with this thing that we have now labeled as a class called first class needs to be indented. So as you'll see here, we have our indented line. Our next indented line here is something we have created, which is called it's basically looks like a variable, a string variable called test, and it's storing the string yay. It could be anything. I basically just want to show you that this is in fact a class attribute, not a class method. So once we have stored this class type into an object somewhere else, if we were to call the .test attribute, it will return this yay string. Just like if we were to ask, our iris data set, what are the labels, what are the label names for this object, it would you could call the attribute and it would tell you. The next line you see here is how to build a function for within a class. This is a method for a class. So usually these functions are going to be related to some variable that is stored in the class, so some sort of attribute. In this case, I'm just showing you the syntax for how to build a method for a class. So it's just like building a function, guys. So you see the first thing here is we have our def, which is like define. I've created a hello method as our naming convention for this function. And remember, we should always use self for our first variable name for creating functions in Python that has to deal with scope. And the only thing I got it to do in this case was to print something to console, which was to print the word method to console. And this is it, guys. What we've done here is not actually created the object, however. We've just created the blueprint for the object. We said, okay, if we were to make this object, these are the things that have to go into it. In order to actually use this object, we have to assign it to a variable, okay? So once this has all been made and we've like indented back to the beginning because we are no longer building code for this class type, I've created a simple object called A, and I've said, okay, I want A to equal this custom class that I made. So we use the assignment operator for that, right? And so now if I were to go a dot test, it should return the attribute, which is the string yay. And if I go a dot hello method, it should return print method. It should run the function hello method. And, hopefully, so if you have parameters, and if you build a function with your class, it would need parameters or something like that, but basically, this is what you would expect. So you would first get yay for this one, and you would get method for this one. So next, guys, what we're going to want to do is we're going to go into Jupyter Notebook and start playing around with this and showing you how, like, okay, let's check the type of A to see what kind of class type it tells us it is. Let's check how all of this is working under the hood. Okay, so cool. Let's move over. Alright guys, so here we are in our coding section. So you'll see here that first, this is the exact same code that I showed you in our syntax, where I have an attribute called test and a method called hello method, and I've assigned this class to A here. So what happens when I go A dot and press tab? I have two things that highlight. First is our test attribute, and second is our method. So let's just hit test and let's just run this and see what happens. Okay, so it gives us our output of yay, which is great. That was what we were hoping it would do. Let's try hello method and see what we'd expect it to do. We probably expect it to print method, and in fact it does do that. Next thing I want to show you guys is how to print the type of A and see what comes out from this. See if it gives us something interesting. So look at that. It says it's a class. It's the main class for something called first class. So we have indeed created our first class. There are a couple of things that you should do when creating very, very complicated classes that have proper structure to them, like initializing variables should be done within its own method. However, in this class, I really just wanted to show you the basics of how to start building your classes and methods. So the next thing I want to show you is, okay, let's say you have created your class. Let's say you want to actually like save this and import it into another script somewhere. Like you want to start storing all of your functions and classes for a particular object type that you constantly use all the time. How would that work, and how would you do that? Well, basically what you would do, guys, is if this is your class type, you save this into your folder that has all of your Python code in it. And what you can do, if you remember, I've at one point or another, at one point or another, I have created this folder here for our classes, and I was recommending you build one of these folders. I've put that code you were just looking at into a file called test.py, And if I just move into this here, you'll see that I'm in that folder, and I just moved into Python. And if I wanted to then use this script, I could then just do import test. And now I can do, what did we call it? We call it first class, right? Yeah, test dot first class, I think. Yeah, there we go. So now we go a equals test dot first class and a dot test. Yay, a dot hello method. Oh, it's missing value. 1. There we go. Oh, okay. So let's actually, we should look at what hello method actually is. In this one I might have made something different, but basically you'll notice here that I've actually just loaded up this method into or this class from another file into Python so that I could use it for something else. And that was basically all I really wanted to show you by the end of that. Okay, guys? So with that, let's do a recap. So what did we learn today, guys? We learned how to basically the basics of building a custom class. So building a custom class from scratch, the most important things you need to learn. There are other things you need to learn in terms of proper form when building this into production level code if you were to work for a big company, let's say. But for now, learning the fundamentals of how to actually just build a class and use it, that's what you've learned in this course. You've also learned how to then save these classes to then be used for yourself in later code, which is a great building block to keep you organized and keep you building your code for greater things. So with that, guys, thank you very much and see you next class.